Hello there. Welcome to whatever we're calling this show. I'm Sombraptor. You may know me from my YouTube channel and other online whatnot, where I talk about Star Wars lore and other such nonsense. I've been invited here to Theostar Group to talk about lore, so that's why I'm here. And beside me is
Theogek. That's my game name. Some of you may know me as a healer who struggles sometimes, or as a DPS, but we're very excited to bring this to you and share with you some Raptor's knowledge. He's extremely knowledgeable about lore and loves to talk about it, so that's what we're going to do here today.
Oh, thank you. You're very kind. So anyway, today's topic is the Yuuzhan Vong. So to give a quick out of universe then in universe rundown on who and what the Vong are exactly, from a Doylist perspective, that is out of universe, they were a species from that basically acted as the antagonists of the New Jedi Order novel series in the early 2000s. They were basically created as a result of many readers had gotten tired of, insert Imperial Remnant faction number 37 here, or insert dark side Force cults here, and combinations thereof as the antagonists for the varying Star Wars series. And they basically wanted to do a massive shift, because these were not Force related at all. Rather, they were cut off from the Force without direct applications even being able to be performed upon them. Now, that's a subject of controversy among the fans. The Vong have always been controversial among fans. Some of them thought they were a breath of fresh air. Others thought, they're just edgy, try hard, trying to be unique just for the sake of being unique. Especially in regards to they're all sadomasochists, and like they perform scarification in honor of their gods, yada yada. And but there are other elements that just made them very unique in the universe. One such thing being the fact that all their technology was called biotech. It's nothing inorganic. Anything inorganic is an affront to their religion, so there's that. And then from an in-universe perspective, they originated from a galaxy far, far away to the galaxy far, far away. And as such, everything about them is, well, alien, despite some there are similarities in their genome to the human one. But beyond speculation there, it's implied that they actually traveled sublight speed through the intergalactic void, so it took literally tens upon tens of thousands of years. Even at relativistic speeds, basically the same way that the theoretical concept of generation ships to reach Alpha Centauri, for example, here from Earth, albeit with much faster. So besides some very early scout elements having been encountered during the Old Republic era, specifically by the Mandalorians, the rest of their basically the bulk of their forces reached the galaxy at last, circa, I believe, in the early 20s ABY. That's after the original Star Wars film, if you're not familiar with the Yavin calendar. Yeah, the Yuuzhan Vong War basically ended up being one of, if not the most catastrophic conflicts in terms of death toll the galaxy had ever seen, with, unless I'm mistaken, it was 365 trillion deaths. Yeah. However, through a series of events which occurred in the New Jedi Order books, which I'm not going to spoil, yeah, basically a ceasefire does occur, and they begin to integrate into galactic society, albeit very much as pariahs for obvious reasons. So that's the very basic rundown on them. And I believe you said you had done a little bit of reading on them and have a bunch of questions yourself, so I'd be happy to answer them.
I do. And thank you very much for that, Film Raptor. I think that gives us a good overview of who the Yuuzhan Vong are. I think many of us have probably heard about them, but really don't have any fundamental information. They are, and they do appear in the comics, but very ancillary and not very clear who they are, other than they're a race that dominates from their uniqueness. So earlier you mentioned that they were precluded from the Force, that the Jedi couldn't use the Force on them, couldn't even sense them, and that was one of the reasons why they dominated in the beginning of the war and were so effective against the Jedi. But I also hear that they were susceptible to Force attacks, and I'm just curious, what types of attacks would they be susceptible to?
Right. So it's a common fan misconception that the Vong had nothing to do with the Force. They, like any being in the Star Wars universe, had a connection to the Force. It's just that theirs was actually cut off because their original homeworld was actually a sentient being called Yuuzhan Tar, aka their original god. Or was it Zonama Sekot?
Wait, no, it was Yuuzhan Tar. Zonama Sekot was the offspring of that living planet. Yeah, no, so fully sapient being, which seems like a, kind of wacky out there concept, but I don't know, I like it.
They had become so debauched that their friggin', the plan was like, okay, cut them off from the Force. Very interestingly enough, a similar thing happened to the Rakata under mysterious circumstances in the ancient era of the pre-Republic, where so similar circumstances happened on two different planets, although it was more drastic for the Vong, because I believe the Rakata was still there in the Force, but they just rarely expressed force sensitivity. Now, in regards to how applications of the force worked, basically, yes, direct applications did not work. Even assuming one was weak-minded, for instance, you couldn't perform a Jedi mind trick, or even, if you wanted to lift one telekinetically, it just didn't work. However, indirect things like, telekinetically lifting a rock and throwing it at them, they weren't exempt from physics. Did that answer your question, or did I miss some element?
It does. So just to clear it up for me, so like in the case of the Sentinel, the Jedi Sentinel, who can throw his swords, he would be able to do damage to the Yuuzhan Vong if he threw his sword.
Yes. However, it needed to be a very accurate throw, because as it turns out, the armor of the Yuuzhan Vong, the Vondun crab armor, is it is one of the few elements in the Star Wars universe, besides which shares properties with things such as Beskar, Cortosis, Fricite, Zillo Beast Hide, in that it actually has the thermal resistance properties to, resist lightsaber strikes. So they were basically, almost perfectly made to be Jedi hunting killing machines, which, I mean, from an out-of-universe perspective, they kind of were.
I have some questions for you, but I have one that just pops into my mind that I keep reading and it keeps bothering me. But if 356 trillion people died in the galaxy, in our galaxy, how many people were there in the galaxy, if you know? It seems to me like every corner would have been wiped clean, but
well, unless I'm mistaken, the galaxy far, far away, the population was something along the lines of 100 quadrillion. So even though it's a literally incomprehensible number to the human mind, it's still wiped several planets clean. It still wasn't. It'd be equivalent to, say, I don't know, the American Revolutionary War, in terms of, like, there were a lot of deaths, but in terms of worldwide demographic shift, no, it didn't do much, unlike, say, both of the World Wars or the Mongol conquests, which reduced the carbon impact of humanity for decades, believe it or not. But, sorry, I was rambling. Please, got any more questions?
yeah, I had a question. I was reading up on them, and there was an interesting phrase to me that in it they said they were an extra galactic species, but one notable difference was one element of their genetic structure was in everything that they created. And I just wondered if you could elaborate on that, what that meant from a genetic viewpoint. That's my question.
Right. So, similarly to the real world concept of gene splicing, in which, for example, we've taken jellyfish genes, put them in cats, have glow-in-the-dark kittens. They also implanted elements of their own DNA into all of their genetic experiments, basically. So I can't recall if that's just, if unless I'm mistaken, that is a part of their religious stuff in regards to like purifying other inferior life forms and whatever. But yes, as stated previously, they actually shared an unusual similarity to humans, which in official Star Wars I should say legends, I suppose, was never really answered or elaborated upon. There actually is a oh boy, this is a whole other ramble, but there's a semi-official online book called Supernatural Encounters: The Trial and Transformation of Arhol Hextrophon. Yes, that's a mouthful. That basically goes in depth about all these very esoteric elements of basically every single obscure weird thing it gives an explanation for, and including this very question there, alongside stuff as the origin of where exactly humans came from in the Star Wars galaxy. But that's a conversation for another time. Do you have any other questions?
It sounds like a whole complete...
Oh yes.
It sounds like a whole other complete show.
That it does.
I'm sorry.
Hint, hint. But yes, any questions remaining?
Final one. I just thought this was interesting. They have blue sacks under their eyes, and I'm assuming that must look like when people get very tired and they say you have sacks under your eyes. I'm assuming it looked like that, except for it was blue. But one of the interesting things that I noted was that these sacks were changeable, that if based on their emotions. So if they were happy, you could tell from just looking at their eyes. If they were angry or enraged, you could tell from looking at their eyes. And I was just wondering if you could share a little bit more about what actually happened to those sacks when their emotions changed.
That's a very specific thing to focus on, but okay. Unless I'm mistaken, they kind of like expanded and contracted, like to indicate the mental state of said Vong. Like a lot of real animals have similar display structures in terms of to indicate mood. Like for example, chameleons don't actually just change color to blend in. They also do it to send messages to others. Why am I going that obscure? Yeah, I mean even humans, if your face goes, if your face gets flushed red, you're probably embarrassed. If you lose color, you're probably either frightened or unexpected. I believe one of the source books said something along the lines of that yeah, they rarely, if ever, had detectable facial expressions like we do. So and that basically, to read their body language, you had to understand how the sacks worked. But
makes me think of peacock. I love peacocks, but the whole reason they fan their tail is for mating. So it sounds similar in that their eyes would change size and perhaps color based on their mood.
Right, yeah. No, there's a ton of display structures that are very, very fascinating. But I believe that's all the time we have today. Anything else from you?
No, thank you very much, Some Raptor, for your knowledge and for joining us and sharing it. I think this segment folks are just going to love, because we're going to get into some of the really esoteric details that aren't really mentioned in the Star Wars The Old Republic game, or in general. You have to look for them. So I think that this will be a fun segment for folks.
Yeah, no, always happy to be sharing my knowledge. Well, and thank you for listening, dear viewer. I'll see you around, and may the force be with you always.